In the heart of Gomba village, where the river sang softly against the rocks and the wind carried the whispers of ancestors, lived a girl named Sawida. She was gentle, with eyes that shone like morning dew, and a voice so pure that even the birds paused to listen. But despite her kind heart, Sawida's life was filled with hardship. Her mother, Mawina, had died when she was just a child. Her father, Exile, a hard-working but weary man, remarried a woman named Jandira, hoping to bring warmth back into their home. But Jandira was not the loving mother he had wished for. From the moment she set foot in their house, she treated Sawida like an outsider, giving her the hardest chores and never a kind word. Jandira's own daughter, Luwina, was spoiled and selfish. She was nothing like Sawida, yet Jandira adored her. While Luwina wore fine beads and colorful fabrics, Sawida dressed in old, worn-out clothes. While Luwina ate the best food, Sawida was given scraps. No matter how hard Sawida worked, Jandira always found a reason to scold her, and Exile, blinded by his love for Jandira, never defended his daughter. But Sawida had something that no one could take away: her voice. When she sang, it was as if the earth itself listened. Her songs carried across the village, bringing comfort to those who were sad and peace to those in pain. The elders believed her voice was a gift from the ancestors, a rare blessing that could heal the spirit. People would often gather near the village well just to hear her sing. Children sat at her feet, their eyes wide with wonder. Even the village chief, a man of great wisdom, once said, "This girl carries the soul of our ancestors in her voice." But while the villagers admired her, Jandira and Luwina seethed with jealousy. Jandira could not stand to see Sawida loved by others. She hated how people spoke of Sawida's beauty and grace, how they praised her voice as if she were royalty. To Jandira, Sawida was nothing more than a servant, a girl meant to stay silent and unseen. And so, in the darkness of their home, far from the eyes of the village, Jandira and Luwina made sure Sawida knew her place. They insulted her, humiliated her, and worked her to exhaustion. But no matter how much pain they caused her, Sawida never lost her kindness. She never raised her voice in anger. She only sang. Yet, little did Sawida know, the same voice that made her beloved would soon make her a target of great cruelty. Jandira's hatred for Sawida grew stronger with each passing day. Every morning, as the sun rose over Gomba village, the sound of Sawida's sweet voice would fill the air. The villagers would stop their work to listen, their hearts warming with peace. Children would run to her, their laughter mixing with her melody. Even the elders, who had seen many seasons, spoke of her voice as a blessing from the ancestors. But while the village rejoiced, Jandira burned with jealousy. No matter how much she praised her own daughter, Luwina, no one in the village paid attention. Luwina had no special talents, no kindness that drew people close. She was spoiled and arrogant, always looking down on others. Yet, Jandira treated her like a queen, dressing her in the finest clothes and feeding her the best food, while Sawida was left in rags, eating whatever little was given to her. But still, no one admired Luwina. All they ever talked about was Sawida, her beauty, her kindness, and most of all, her voice. Jandira could not stand it. "How dare a girl like her steal the attention that should belong to my daughter?" she hissed to Luwina one evening. Her hatred twisted inside her like a snake, and she knew she had to destroy Sawida's image before it was too late. She began spreading lies throughout the village. When the villagers gathered near the well, whispering about Sawida's songs, Jandira would shake her head and sigh. "You think she is kind," she would say. "You do not see what happens inside my home. That girl is full of pride. She sings only to make herself look important." Some villagers began to doubt. Could it be true? Was Sawida really as kind as she seemed? The lies did not stop there. Jandira poisoned Ekeno's heart, telling him that his daughter had grown disrespectful, that she no longer listened to her stepmother's words. "She embarrasses us, husband," Jandira would say, lowering her voice as if in sorrow. "She sings and acts like she is better than Luwina. She does not even obey me anymore." Ekeno, already blinded by his love for Jandira, began to look at Sawida with doubt in his eyes. He no longer smiled when she sang. He no longer asked how she was doing. Sawida saw the change in her father's face, and it broke her heart. Luwina, encouraged by her mother's hatred, became crueler. She mocked Sawida every chance she got. "Do you think your singing makes you special?" she sneered. "No one cares about you. You are just a useless girl, with a useless voice." One evening, while Sawida was out fetching water, Luwena went into her small room and tore her only good dress, the one the village elder had gifted her for a festival. She broke her handmade beads, scattering them across the dirt floor. When Sawida returned and saw the destruction, tears filled her eyes. But she did not scream. She did not fight. She simply sat down, picked up the broken beads, and began to hum a soft tune. No matter how much they tried to break her, Sawida refused to let hatred take root in her heart. She believed in kindness. She believed in the power of resilience. And so, even with a heavy heart, she continued to sing. The sun was high over Gikomba village when a royal messenger arrived, his horse kicking up dust as he rode through the village square. He was dressed in fine robes, the golden emblem of the kingdom of Sambuli shining on his chest. The villagers gathered around in curiosity, murmuring among themselves. A royal messenger in their small village. What could he possibly want? The messenger raised his voice so all could hear. The great Prince Kanga of Sambuli has fallen ill, he announced. The kingdom's finest healers have tried everything, but his sickness remains. A prophecy has spoken. Only the voice of a pure-hearted maiden can cure him. We are searching for the one whose voice is like the river spirits, the one whose song can bring peace to troubled souls. A hush fell over the crowd. Then, as if by one mind, the villagers all turned to look at Sawida. She was standing near the well, her hands gripping the water pot she had just filled. Whispers filled the air. Sawida! It must be her. Her voice is unlike any other. The ancestors have truly blessed her. The messenger noticed their reaction and looked at Sawida carefully. Is this true? He asked. Do you possess such a voice? Sawida, humble as always, lowered her eyes. I do not know if my voice is magical, but I have always sung from my heart. The villagers nodded eagerly. She is the one you seek. Excitement spread like wildfire. The idea that one of their own might be chosen to heal a prince was unheard of. Sawida's name would be known across the land. She would be honored, respected, and perhaps even rewarded with riches beyond imagination. But not everyone shared in the joy. Jandira stood at the back of the crowd, her hands clenched into fists, her face dark with anger. If Sawida was taken to the royal palace, she would gain wealth, power, and respect, things Jandira could never allow. How could she, after spending years trying to make Sawida feel worthless, how could she let the girl she despised rise above her own daughter? That night, as the village celebrated, Jandira sat in her hut, rage burning inside her. She thought of everything she had done to keep Sawida down, the lies, the punishments, the cruelty. Yet still, the girl continued to shine. Jandira could not let this happen. And then, a chilling idea came to her. If Sawida had no tongue, she could not sing. The thought sent shivers of excitement through her. Yes, that was the answer. If Sawida could not speak, if her beautiful voice was taken from her forever, the royal messenger would have no choice but to leave. Sawida would remain in Gikomba, useless and forgotten, just as Jandira wanted. She called Luwena to her side, her voice low and filled with malice. We must act quickly, she whispered, before they take her away. Luwena's lips curled into a wicked smile. What must we do, mother? Jandira leaned in closer, her voice barely above a breath. We silence her. That night, as the village slept, Jandira sharpened a small blade, her heart pounding with cruel determination. The moment had come. She would make sure that Sawida would never sing again. The night was silent, with only the soft whispers of the wind rustling through the trees. The village of Gikomba was asleep, unaware of the evil that was about to unfold inside Akeno's home. Sawida lay peacefully on her small mat, her dreams filled with the melody of songs she had yet to sing. But in the shadows, two figures moved like hungry beasts, Jandira and Luwena. Jandira clutched a sharp blade in her hand, her heart pounding with excitement. Hold her down, she hissed to Luwena. Luwena pressed her hands over Sawida's arms, pinning her to the ground. Sawida's eyes snapped open in shock, but before she could scream, Jandira clamped a rough hand over her mouth. Shh, she whispered, her voice dripping with malice. You have sung your last song. Fear shot through Sawida like lightning. She struggled, her body twisting in panic, but Luwena's grip was strong. Her own stepmother, the woman her father had married to protect her, was looking down at her with nothing but hatred. Then, before she could plead for mercy, Jandira brought the blade down. A sharp, unbearable pain exploded in Sawida's mouth as her stepmother cut out her tongue. Her body convulsed in agony. Tears streamed down her face. her silent screams lost in the darkness. Blood pooled beneath her, soaking into the mat. Her tongue, her gift, her voice, her very soul was gone. Jandira stood back, breathing heavily, as Sawida writhed in pain. Luina stared at the trembling girl, and then at the piece of flesh on the ground, a twisted smile forming on her lips. "Now let's see you sing," she whispered mockingly. Satisfied, Jandira wiped the blade clean and turned to her daughter. "Go wake Akeno," she instructed. "It's time to finish this." Moments later, Akeno stormed into the room, his eyes widening in horror at the sight before him. His daughter lay in a pool of blood, gasping and trembling like a wounded animal. Jandira rushed to him, tears welling in her eyes. "Husband, it is as I feared," she sobbed. "Sawida tried to curse us. When we caught her whispering dark spells, she tried to cut out her own tongue in a fit of rage." Akeno's face twisted in sorrow and disbelief. "No, my daughter would never." "Look at her," Jandira cried, pointing at Sawida. "She is cursed. The spirits have turned against her. If you keep her here, misfortune will fall upon us all." Sawida reached out to her father, her eyes begging him to see the truth, but he only stepped back, grief clouding his judgment. "I cannot keep you here," he said, his voice breaking. "Leave, Sawida. You must go." A fresh wave of pain tore through her heart, more painful than the wound in her mouth. Her own father, the man she loved, the man she had always trusted, had cast her out. With her vision blurred by tears, Sawida stumbled out of the house, blood trailing behind her. The night was cold, the sky vast and unforgiving. She tried to cry out, to scream for help, but only a horrible broken sound escaped her throat. She had no home, no family, no voice. Alone in the dark, she ran into the forest, disappearing into the shadows. The forest was dark and endless, its towering trees whispering secrets in the wind. Sawida stumbled through the thick undergrowth, her vision blurred by pain and tears. Blood dripped from her mouth, staining her trembling hands. She wanted to scream, to call out for help, but no sound would come. The night was cruel and cold, swallowing her whole. Her legs gave out near a river, and she collapsed onto the damp earth. The water shimmered under the moonlight, its soft ripples singing a melody only the spirits could hear. Sawida clutched her chest, her body shaking from exhaustion and grief. Her voice was gone. Her home was gone. She had nothing left. Just as the darkness began to consume her, footsteps approached. A soft, steady rhythm, moving closer. A shadow loomed over her. "Child of sorrow," a voice murmured. "The river has brought you to me." Through her fading consciousness, Sawida saw the figure of an old woman standing above her. She had silver hair, dark, wise eyes, and skin etched with the lines of time. She wore robes of deep indigo, adorned with beads that glowed faintly in the moonlight. In her hands, she held a staff carved with ancient symbols. The woman knelt beside her and placed a gentle hand on her forehead. "You have suffered greatly," she whispered, "but the spirits are not done with you yet." Sawida wanted to speak, to ask who this woman was, but the pain was too much. Her eyes closed, and darkness claimed her. When she awoke, she was lying inside a warm hut. Herbs hung from the ceiling, their scent filling the air. A small fire crackled nearby, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The old woman sat beside her, grinding medicine in a stone bowl. Sawida tried to sit up, but the woman placed a hand on her shoulder. "Rest, child," she said. "Your wounds are deep, but you are safe." Sawida touched her throat, the reality of her loss sinking in. No matter how hard she tried, no words would come. Her heart clenched with despair. The old woman watched her carefully. "You have lost your voice, but not your spirit," she said. "I am Elder Namora, the moon healer. The river led you to me for a reason." Over the next few weeks, Namora cared for Sawida, feeding her healing broths and applying special salves to her wounds. But more than that, she taught her how to speak without words. Using a wooden drum, Namora showed Sawida how to communicate through rhythms. "Each beat tells a story," she explained. "Your hands can speak when your tongue cannot." Sawida learned quickly, tapping out messages, expressing emotions through the music. Namora also taught her the language of symbols, drawing messages in the dirt and carving them into wood. And then there was dance. "Your body is its own voice," Namora told her. "When you move, the world will listen." Sawida embraced the lessons, pouring her heart into every movement, every beat. Though her tongue had been stolen, her spirit remained unbroken. She would not be silenced, not by pain, not by cruelty. Her story was far from over. The morning sun bathed the treetops in golden light as Elder Namora led Sawida through the dense forest. They walked in silence, the only sounds being the rustling leaves and the distant calls of birds. Sawida's heart pounded. She didn't know where Namora was taking her, but she trusted the old woman. After what felt like hours, they reached a hidden clearing. Before them stood a village, unlike any Sawida had ever seen. Small huts, with thatched roofs nestled between towering trees. People moved about, some walking with crutches, others with missing limbs, some unable to speak, just like her. And yet, the village was full of life. Children played, elders carved wooden instruments, and groups of people sat in circles, drumming and singing in unison. "This is Kanga," Namora said with a smile. "A home for those the world has cast aside. Here, no one is broken, no one is weak. We are a family." Sawida watched in awe. She had never seen a place where people who were different were treated with such respect. The villagers welcomed her with warm smiles, their eyes kind and understanding. They did not ask about her tongue. They did not pity her. In Kanga, Sawida discovered something extraordinary, the power of movement. One evening, as the village gathered around a large fire, Namora introduced Sawida to a woman named Binta, a master of dance. "The voice is not the only way to tell a story," Binta told her. "Your body can speak louder than words." At first, Sawida was hesitant. She had always used her voice to express herself. Now, without it, she felt incomplete. But Binta was patient. She showed her how to let the rhythm of the drums guide her body. Sawida learned to move with the wind, to let her feet glide across the earth like a whisper. Each step, each turn, each sway of her hands held meaning. Her pain, her sorrow, her hope. It all flowed through her movements. She practiced day and night, pouring her soul into every dance. Soon, she was not just following the rhythm, she was creating it. The villagers were mesmerized. Sawida's dances spoke of loss, of resilience, of the fire that still burned inside her, despite everything she had suffered. They saw her pain, her strength, her message, all without a single word. "She is not just a dancer," one villager whispered. "She is a storyteller." As time passed, Sawida's name spread beyond Kanga. Travelers from distant villages came to witness the girl who spoke with her body. They called her the Silent Oracle, believing that her movements carried the wisdom of the spirits. One night, as she stood before the village, the fire casting flickering shadows on her skin, Sawida danced a story of betrayal and survival. She moved like a river, fluid and unstoppable. Her arms stretched toward the sky. Her feet pounded the earth like a heartbeat. She told of a girl who lost everything but found a new way to be heard. And as she finished, the village erupted into cheers. She had lost her voice, but she had found something greater. She had found her destiny. In the grand palace of Sambuli, the air was thick with sorrow. Prince Kingo, once strong and full of life, lay weak on his bed, his skin pale, his breaths shallow. The finest healers had tried their best, herbs, prayers, even spells, but nothing could cure him. The kingdom held its breath, fearing that their beloved prince was slipping away. One night, as the palace torches flickered against the stone walls, the high priestess of Sambuli called for a gathering. Clad in robes of deep crimson, she stood before the king and queen, her piercing eyes filled with certainty. She raised her hands toward the heavens and spoke. "The one who lost her voice will bring back the voice of the land." Her words sent murmurs through the royal court. Who was this person? The king, desperate to save his son, ordered the kingdom's elders to decipher the prophecy. Old memories stirred. They spoke of a girl from Gomba, a girl with a voice so enchanting it could calm storms and bring peace to troubled hearts. But when they sent messengers to Gomba, they heard only whispers of tragedy. "Sawida," one elder murmured. She was silenced. Shock rippled through the room. Had they lost their last hope? But the high priestess remained calm. "She is not gone," she said. "The spirits would not send a prophecy for the dead. She lives, and she must be found." The king wasted no time. He summoned his most trusted warrior, a man known for his strength and unwavering loyalty. Tembo, a towering figure with scars that told the stories of many battles, knelt before the king. "Find her," the king commanded. "Find the girl who lost her voice." With no further questions, Tembo set out on his journey. He traveled through forests, crossed rivers, and questioned villagers. but none knew where Sawida had gone. Days turned into weeks, and doubt crept into his heart. Had he been sent on a fool's quest? One evening, as he sat by a fire in a remote village, he overheard a traveller speaking. "They say there is a girl in Kanga," the man said, "a silent oracle who dances stories instead of speaking them." Tembo's heart pounded. A silent oracle. Could it be? He stood, determination burning in his chest. Tomorrow he would ride to Kanga, and if fate was on his side, he would find the girl who had once been silenced, because now the kingdom needed her voice more than ever. The sun hung low in the sky when Tembo rode into Kanga, his sharp eyes scanning the village. He had travelled far, faced countless dead ends, but now he had a name, a place, and a sliver of hope, the silent oracle. As he dismounted his horse, villagers watched him cautiously. Kanga was a place of refuge, a place for those the world had discarded. Outsiders were rare. Tembo approached the central gathering ground, where a group had gathered around a tall, graceful woman. She moved like water, her hands telling stories where words could not. The moment he saw her, he knew. Sawida. Her hair was longer, her face sharper with time, but the same presence surrounded her. She was different now, stronger, not the fragile girl who had once sung melodies that carried in the wind. Tembo stepped forward and knelt slightly, a sign of respect. "The Prince of Sambuli is dying," he said, his deep voice steady. "A prophecy has spoken your name. You must come with me." Sawida froze. She had learned to live in silence, to dance her pain away. Now, fate was calling her back to the world that had betrayed her. She shook her head, pressing a hand to her throat. How could she help anyone without her voice? Namora stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Sawida's shoulder. "You have been given a new way to speak," she said. "Maybe this is why. Maybe this is your true destiny." The villagers murmured in agreement. Sawida had brought light to Kanga, but perhaps her light was meant to shine even farther. That night, Sawida sat by the river, watching the moon ripple on the water's surface. She thought of the past, of Jandira's cruelty, of Luwena's laughter as she was cast out. The idea of returning to Gomba made her chest tighten. Would they still see her as the cursed girl? Yet, the prince's life depended on her. At dawn, she made her decision. She would go. Tembo guided her back through the forests and hills, retracing the painful journey she had once taken alone. This time, she was not bleeding, not broken. This time, she was returning as someone new. As they rode into Gomba, the village fell silent. People gasped, whispered to one another, their eyes wide with shock. "Sawida," someone murmured. "Is it really her?" Many had assumed she had died in the wilderness. Now she stood before them, not weak or wounded, but proud and strong. From the doorway of her home, Jandira saw her and turned pale. She gripped Luwena's arm, her fingers digging in. "This is impossible," she hissed. Luwena swallowed hard, her usual arrogance slipping into fear. What if she speaks? Jandira's heart pounded. If the truth came out, the village would turn against them. They had silenced Sawida once, but now she had returned, and this time she would not be ignored. Sawida was escorted into the grand palace of Sambuli, her heart pounding with every step. The air smelled of burning incense and fresh lilies, the scent of prayers and desperation. The halls were lined with nobles and warriors, their eyes filled with both hope and doubt as they watched her approach. At the far end of the royal chamber lay Prince Kingo. His once vibrant skin was now pale, his lips dry and cracked. He was weak, barely able to lift his head. The kingdom had waited too long, and now time was slipping away. The high priestess stepped forward, her voice steady and filled with wisdom. "The one who lost her voice will bring back the voice of the land," she reminded everyone. "Let the silent oracle speak." Sawida inhaled deeply. She had no words to offer, no songs to sing, but she had something greater. She stepped onto the sacred floor, closed her eyes, and let her body move. At first, there was only silence. Then, a soft rhythm, as her feet tapped against the marble, as her arms stretched like the wings of a bird. Her hands wove unseen stories. Her movements whispered of pain, survival, and destiny. The room seemed to hold its breath, watching her tell a tale without a single word. As she danced, something shifted. A warm energy filled the air, wrapping around Prince Kingo like a gentle wind. His fingers twitched. His breathing deepened. The nobles gasped. The high priestess stepped forward, raising her hands. Even silence has a voice. Even pain tells a story. The energy around them swirled, ancient and powerful. It was as if the spirits of the ancestors had joined Sawida in her dance. Prince Kingo's eyes fluttered open. Strength returned to his limbs. He slowly sat up, his chest rising and falling with new life. A wave of astonishment swept through the palace. She had healed him. Prince Kingo's gaze met Sawida's. There were no words needed. He saw her strength, her pain, her journey, and he understood. He stood and approached her, bowing his head in gratitude. "You have given me life," he said. "Let me give you a home." Before the entire court, he offered her a place of honor in the palace, a seat beside him as a revered oracle of the kingdom. Sawida, once cast out, once left to suffer in silence, had returned not as a victim, but as a legend. Word of Sawida's miraculous return and Prince Kingo's healing spread across the land like wildfire. Messengers carried the news back to Gomba, where the villagers gathered in shock and whispers. For years they had believed Jandira's lies. They had turned their backs on Sawida, thinking she had been cursed. But now the truth was as clear as the midday sun. Ekeno, upon hearing the truth, was shattered. The weight of his guilt pressed down on him like an unmovable stone. He had cast out his own daughter, believing the deceitful words of the woman he had trusted. The thought of Sawida suffering alone in the wild, her voice stolen, made his heart ache. The elders called for a gathering in the village square. The people, once blind to Jandira's cruelty, now demanded justice. Jandira and Luwina were brought forward, their once proud faces now pale with fear. The elders asked them to speak, to deny the accusations if they could, but there was nothing left to say. The truth was undeniable. At that very moment, a terrible wind swept through Gomba, carrying with it the scent of dry earth. The once lush fields began to wither, and the river that had always provided life to the village slowed to a trickle. The sky, once bright and blue, darkened with heavy clouds, but no rain fell. The villagers gasped in horror. "The ancestors are angry," an elder declared. "The land rejects the wicked." Jandira and Luwina fell to their knees, trembling. "Please, forgive us," Jandira cried, her voice desperate. But forgiveness was not hers to demand. The elders decreed that Jandira and Luwina would be exiled from Gomba. They had brought shame and suffering upon the village, and now they would bear the punishment of the ancestors. As they were led out, Jandira turned back one last time, hoping for mercy from Ekeno. But he could not look at her. His daughter had suffered because of his blindness, and no words could undo what had been done. Jandira and Luwina disappeared into the wilderness, their names cursed, their future uncertain. Gomba, though still suffering under the drought, began to heal, because the truth had finally been spoken. The day Sawida returned to Gomba, the village fell into a hushed silence. The people who once turned their backs on her now stood in awe, watching as she entered the place she had been cast out from. She was no longer the helpless girl they had abandoned. She was a woman of power, of grace, a legend who had healed a prince with nothing but her presence. She did not come seeking revenge. She did not come to remind them of their betrayal. Instead, she came with something far greater, wisdom. Sawida walked through the village with calm eyes, taking in the familiar sights, the paths she had once walked as a child. The same people who had whispered about her, who had believed Jandira's lies, now looked at her with shame in their faces. Mothers clutched their children close, elders bowed their heads, and young girls gazed at her with admiration, knowing they stood before someone extraordinary. Then, from the crowd, a broken man stepped forward, Ekeno. His once proud shoulders were slumped, his eyes filled with sorrow. He had spent many nights haunted by the image of his daughter, bleeding, betrayed, abandoned by his own hand. Now she stood before him, alive, radiant, and yet still silent. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Sawida, my child, I have failed you." Tears ran down his weathered face as he fell to his knees before her. "I believed lies. I doubted you when you needed me most. I let you suffer, and for that, I beg for your forgiveness." The village watched, holding their breath. Would Sawida turn away? Would she punish him with the same cruelty he had allowed to happen to her? But Sawida did not step back. Instead, she raised her hand and gently placed it on his head, a sign of mercy, a sign of forgiveness. Ekeno sobbed, pressing his forehead to the ground, overwhelmed by her kindness. He had expected hatred, rejection, but instead, she had chosen to be better than those who had wronged her. Without words, Sawida taught the village what true strength looked like. She spent her days among them, not as a queen, not as a figure to be worshipped, but as a teacher. She showed them that even in silence, there was power. She helped the children learn the rhythms of the drums, showed young girls how to express their voices through movement, and reminded the elders of the wisdom they had once cherished, but had allowed to be clouded by lies. Gomba, once a place of betrayal, became a place of healing. Sawida had returned, not for revenge, but to guide her people back to the light. Sawida's story spread far beyond Gomba, traveling through the villages, across rivers, and into the grand halls of kingdoms. People spoke of the woman who had lost her tongue, but found a greater voice. They called her the silent oracle, the one whose presence alone could bring healing, whose movements spoke truths deeper than words ever could. In Sambuli, Prince Kanga watched Sawida with admiration. He had seen her strength, her resilience, and the way she had turned pain into power. He knew there was no one like her in the world. And so, one evening, under the golden glow of the palace lanterns, he knelt before her. "Sawida," he said, "you healed my body, but more than that, you healed my heart. You have taught me that strength is not in words, but in the spirit. I would be honored if you would stand by my side as my queen." The court gasped. A woman without a tongue, queen of Sambuli? But Sawida only smiled. Gently, she placed her hand on his and shook her head. She was grateful for his kindness, but she did not belong in a palace, bound by the duties of royalty. She belonged to the people, to the land, to the ones who needed her most. Prince Kingo understood. Though he wished she would stay, he knew she was meant for something greater, and so he did not insist. Instead, he vowed to honor her always, ensuring her story was never forgotten. Sawida spent the rest of her life traveling from village to village, helping those who had been cast aside. She healed the wounded, taught the lost, and inspired the hopeless. She became a mother to the forgotten, a sister to the broken, a guiding light to all who crossed her path. Though she never spoke again, her presence was enough. The rhythm of her feet, the wave of her hands, the quiet wisdom in her eyes. These were the languages she used, and the world listened. Years passed, and Sawida's legend only grew. Elders told her story to children by the fire, drummers played beats in her honor, and dancers moved with the grace she had once taught them. In every village, her name was sung, her story danced. Even after she was gone, the lessons she had left behind lived on. And so, karma spoke louder than any voice, and justice was served without a single word being spoken. Many people believe that power comes from loud words, strong voices, and spoken commands. But Sawida's story teaches us that true strength is not in what we say, but in what we do. She lost her tongue, yet she became the most powerful voice in the land. Without speaking, she healed hearts, inspired others, and changed her own fate. Evil will always try to silence the truth. Jandira thought that by cutting off Sawida's tongue, she could erase her gift and bury her destiny. But the truth cannot be buried forever. No matter how hard people try to hide their wrongdoings, justice always finds a way to rise. Jandira and Luena had everything. They controlled the household, spread lies, and made Sawida suffer. But in the end, karma found them. Their cruelty led to their downfall, while Sawida, despite her pain, rose higher than they ever imagined. Sawida's story also reminds us that silence does not mean weakness. Many people mistake quietness for helplessness, but true strength is shown through actions, not words. Sawida could not speak, yet her kindness, resilience, and wisdom spoke louder than any voice. She did not need revenge to prove her worth. Her very existence was proof that good always triumphs over evil. In life, there will always be hardships. People may try to break us, take away what is most precious to us, or make us feel powerless. But just like Sawida, we must remember that our strength is not in what we say. It is in how we rise after we fall.